The screaming started at 3:47 a.m. 8-year-old Marcus Whitmore jolted awake in his silk-sheeted bed, his heart hammering against his ribs as his father's voice thundered through the marble halls of their $50 million estate. This wasn't the usual late-night business call. This was different, raw, desperate, terrifying. "You said the records were destroyed." Jonathan Whitmore's voice cracked like a whip through the darkness. 8 years, Stevens. 8 goddamn years, and now you tell me there might be copies? Marcus pressed his small hands over his ears, but the words sliced through anyway. He'd learned long ago that in a house built of marble and glass, secrets had nowhere to hide. Find her. Find that nurse and anyone else who might have kept files. I don't care what it costs. A pause, then quieter, more chilling, and Stevens? Make sure this is the last conversation we ever have about Riverside. The line went dead. Silence crashed over the Whitmore mansion like a suffocating blanket. Marcus lay frozen, his prosthetic leg resting against the nightstand where he'd placed it before bed. Riverside. He'd heard that name before, whispered in fragments between his parents when they thought he wasn't listening. Something about the place where he was born, something that made his mother cry and his father's jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. Outside his floor-to-ceiling windows, the manicured gardens of their Beacon Hill estate stretched endlessly under the moonlight. Somewhere beyond the wrought iron gates that kept the world out, or kept them in, Marcus sometimes wondered, other children slept peacefully in beds that didn't cost more than most people's cars. Other children who had 2 legs. Other children who had friends. The next morning arrived wrapped in the kind of golden October sunlight that made everything look perfect, if you didn't look too close. Marcus sat in his custom wheelchair on the marble terrace, watching the world beyond the gates with the hungry eyes of a prisoner. A group of neighborhood kids had gathered in the small park across the street, their laughter floating over the estate walls like music from another planet. There was Tommy Chen, whose father owned the corner market. Sarah Williams, whose mother worked at the local library. Miguel Santos, who lived in the apartment building 3 blocks down. Marcus knew all their names, though none of them knew his. He'd memorized their schedules, their favorite games, the way Tommy always scored goals by kicking with his left foot, how Sarah's ponytail bounced when she ran. Master Marcus? Elena, their housekeeper, appeared beside him with a silver tray bearing fresh fruit cut into perfect geometric shapes. Everything in the Whitmore house had to be perfect. Your father wants to see you in his study. Marcus's stomach clenched. His father rarely requested his presence unless something was wrong. Very wrong. The wheelchair's silent wheels glided across marble floors that cost more per square foot than most families earned in a month. Oil paintings worth millions watched him pass, distant, cold faces that matched the atmosphere of his home perfectly. Jonathan Whitmore stood with his back to the door, staring out the study's massive windows at the city skyline. Even from behind, he commanded the room, 6 feet of precision-tailored suits and barely contained power. Forbes had called him a visionary industrialist. The Wall Street Journal dubbed him ruthlessly brilliant. Marcus just called him father, and the word always tasted like ashes. You're 8 years old now, Marcus. Jonathan's voice was calm, controlled, nothing like the raw desperation from the night before. Old enough to understand that our family has responsibilities. Marcus maneuvered his wheelchair closer, his palms sweating against the push rims. Yes, father. There are people in this world who would hurt us if they could. People who are jealous of what we've built, what we've accomplished. Jonathan finally turned, his steel-gray eyes fixing on his son with laser intensity. They might try to befriend you, to get close to our family. You must never trust strangers, Marcus. Especially not children from certain neighborhoods. The emphasis on those last words made Marcus's skin crawl, though he couldn't say why. I understand, father. But Marcus didn't understand. Not really. What he understood was loneliness so profound it felt like drowning. What he understood was watching other children play while he sat behind gates like some broken treasure, too damaged to be touched, too valuable to be discarded. Good boy. Jonathan's rare smile never reached his eyes. Now, I have to go out of town for a few days. Business. You'll stay close to home, won't you? After his father left, Marcus returned to his vigil on the terrace. The afternoon sun painted everything in shades of gold and amber, but the beauty felt hollow, like a movie set designed to look perfect from a distance. That's when he saw her. A girl, maybe 10 years old, with skin the color of warm chocolate and hair braided with colorful beads that caught the sunlight. She stood pressed against the estate's iron gates, her small fingers wrapped around the bars as she peered through with eyes that held more intelligence than most adults Marcus had met. She was thin, too thin, wearing clothes that had seen better days but were clean and carefully mended. A canvas messenger bag hung across her shoulder, bulging with what looked like books. Most people walked past their estate without a second glance, intimidated by the obvious wealth and security cameras. But this girl studied the grounds with the focused attention of someone solving a puzzle. Marcus found himself rolling closer to the gates, drawn by something he couldn't name. As he approached, the girl's gaze shifted from the mansion to him, and their eyes met through the iron bars. She didn't look away. She didn't stare at his wheelchair with that mixture of pity and discomfort he'd grown used to. She just looked at him, really looked, as if she were seeing Marcus, not just the billionaire's disabled son. "Hi," she said, her voice clear and unafraid. "I'm Zara." Marcus glanced around nervously. Elena was nowhere in sight, and the security guards were probably watching from their hidden positions, but none of them had moved to intercede. Yet. "I'm Marcus," he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "You look lonely," Zara said with the brutal honesty that only children possess. The simple truth of it hit Marcus like a physical blow. He was lonely. Desperately, achingly, completely alone in a house full of people who saw him as either a burden or a responsibility. "Maybe," he admitted. Zara shifted her bag, and Marcus caught a glimpse of medical documents peeking out between books. Something about the letterhead looked familiar, though he couldn't place where he'd seen it before. "I come here sometimes," she said. "This neighborhood, I mean. My grandmother used to work at the hospital where you were born." Marcus's breath caught. "St. Mary's?" "Yeah." Zara's expression grew sad. "She was a nurse there. She told me stories about this tiny baby who was so brave, even though he was sick. She said she always wondered what happened to him." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a crack in the walls he'd built around his heart. "What's in your bag?" he asked, desperate to change the subject before emotion overwhelmed him. "Books, mostly. And some of my grandmother's old papers. She's in the hospital now, and I'm trying to sort through her things." Zara's voice caught slightly. "The doctors say, well, they say I should be prepared." Before Marcus could respond, the sound of a car engine made them both turn. A black sedan was pulling through the estate gates, not his father's usual limousine, but something more subtle, more menacing. Two men in expensive suits got out, their movements predatory as they approached the house. Marcus had never seen them before, but something about their presence made his blood run cold. "I should go," Zara said quickly, seemingly sensing the shift in atmosphere. She began backing away from the gates. "Wait!" Marcus called out, suddenly desperate not to lose this connection, this first genuine human contact he'd had in years. But Zara was already disappearing around the corner, her colorful braids bouncing as she hurried away. Marcus watched until she vanished completely, leaving him alone with his questions and a growing sense of dread. As he turned back toward the house, one of the men in suits was watching him from the terrace. Their eyes met across the distance, and the man's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Marcus suddenly remembered his father's words from that morning, "There are people in this world who would hurt us if they could." But as he rolled back toward the mansion, past the perfectly manicured gardens and through the shadow of wealth that had always felt more like a prison than a privilege, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that the real danger wasn't outside the gates. It was already inside. And somewhere in the city, a girl named Zara was carrying documents that could change everything, if she lived long enough to understand what they meant. The game, though neither child knew it yet, had already begun. If you are enjoying this video, do well to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Chapter 2. The smell of industrial bleach and desperation clung to the walls of Riverside General Hospital like a disease that refused to be cured. Zara Johnson sat in the hard plastic chair beside her grandmother's bed, her small hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. At 10 years old, she'd learned to drink coffee black, not because she liked it, but because cream and sugar cost extra, and every penny mattered when you lived on the wrong side of everything. Baby girl, her grandmother's voice was paper-thin, barely audible above the steady beep of monitors that measured the failing rhythm of her heart. Come closer. Zara scooted the chair forward, careful not to disturb the tangle of tubes and wires that seemed to be the only things keeping grandmother Rose tethered to this world. Rose Johnson had raised Zara since she was 3, after the cancer took Mama, the same cancer that was now claiming Rose, cell by poison cell. I need to tell you something, Rose whispered, her dark eyes still sharp despite the morphine drip. Something about your mama. Something about this whole damn neighborhood. Zara leaned in, her braids falling forward like a curtain around them. In the 8 months since Rose's diagnosis, these moments of clarity had become rare and precious. Most days, her grandmother drifted in a haze of pain medication and memories, calling out for people who'd been dead for decades. I worked at St. Mary's Hospital for 32 years, Rose began, her voice gaining strength as if the truth itself were medicine. Saw thousands of babies come into this world. But there was one, a little boy, born with one leg missing. Beautiful child, brave as anything. Zara nodded. She'd heard fragments of this story before, usually when Rose was sorting through the boxes of papers she kept under their kitchen table. Medical records, newspaper clippings, photographs, a lifetime of memories that Rose guarded like treasure. His mama, she was so young, so scared. Rich white lady who'd come down to Riverside for some charity event while she was pregnant. Drank from the water fountain at the community center. Rose's laugh was bitter as broken glass. Same water fountain your mama drank from every day growing up. The monitors beeped faster, matching the acceleration of Rose's heartbeat. Zara felt her own pulse quicken, sensing they were approaching dangerous territory, the kind of truth that people killed to keep buried. Grandmother, you should rest. No, baby. Listen to me. Rose's grip on Zara's hand was surprisingly strong. That water, it wasn't just water. Whitmore Industries had been dumping chemicals in the river for years. Stuff that causes birth defects, cancer, all kinds of poison. They knew. That boy's daddy, he knew what his company was doing, but he kept quiet because it was cheaper than proper disposal. Zara's world tilted sideways. Whitmore Industries? As in Jonathan Whitmore? The billionaire? The very one. And when his son was born damaged, when the test results came back showing chemicals in the mama's blood, they covered it up. Paid off doctors, bought silence, moved the family away from the bad neighborhood. Rose's voice cracked with decades of suppressed rage. But they left us here to die slow, poisoned by their greed. The coffee cup slipped from Zara's numb fingers, shattering against the linoleum floor. The sound echoed through the small room like gunshots, but neither of them moved to clean it up. That's why Mama got sick, Zara breathed. That's why half this neighborhood got sick. That's why Mrs. Patterson's boy was born without proper kidneys. That's why old Mr. Williams has been coughing up blood for 15 years. Rose struggled to sit up straighter. I kept the records, baby. All of them. Birth certificates, blood test results, internal memos I wasn't supposed to see. Everything. Zara's mind raced, connecting dots that painted a picture so ugly it took her breath away. Why didn't you ever say anything? Why didn't you go to the police, the newspapers? Rose's smile was infinitely sad. You think anybody cares what happens to poor black folks in Riverside? You think a billionaire's word wouldn't crush an old nurse's testimony like a bug? She coughed, a sound that seemed to come from the bottom of her soul. But I kept the evidence anyway. For someday. For someone brave enough to use it. Where is it? Where did you hide everything? Under the loose floorboard in the kitchen, by the refrigerator. Coffee tin wrapped in plastic. But Zara, baby, Rose's voice grew urgent, desperate. You got to be careful. These people, they don't just have money. They have power. They've killed to keep this secret buried. Before Zara could respond, a commotion in the hallway made them both freeze. Voices, male, authoritative, moving with purpose toward their room. Rose's monitors began beeping frantically as her heart rate spiked. They found us, she whispered, terror flooding her eyes. Baby, you got to go. Now. Through the window. But it was too late. Two men in expensive suits filled the doorway, their presence sucking all the warmth from the small room. The taller one had silver hair and cold blue eyes that seemed to catalog everything worth destroying. His companion was younger, broader, with the kind of smile that promised pain. Ms. Johnson, the silver-haired man said, his voice smooth as poisoned honey. I'm Mr. Stevens. We're from Whitmore Industries' legal department. We understand you've been telling stories about our company. Rose squeezed Zara's hand so hard her knuckles went white. Get out of my room. I got nothing to say to you. Oh, but we have so much to discuss. Stevens stepped closer, and Zara caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something that smelled like decay. Ancient history, medical records, the wild imaginings of a dying woman desperate for someone to blame for life's cruel randomness. Those aren't wild imaginings, Zara found her voice, surprised by how steady it sounded. She was there. She saw everything. Stephen's attention shifted to her, and Zara felt like a mouse being studied by a snake. Ah, the granddaughter. Zara Johnson, age 10, straight-A student at Riverside Elementary despite the challenging circumstances. Such potential. Such a pity that potential sometimes leads young people into dangerous territories. The threat was velvet-wrapped but unmistakable. Rose's breathing grew labored, the monitors screaming now as her body fought against stress and medication and the weight of 30 years' worth of buried secrets. You leave her alone, Rose gasped. She's just a child. She doesn't know anything. Children have such active imaginations, Stevens mused, never taking his eyes off Zara. They tell such elaborate stories. Sometimes those stories can cause a great deal of inconvenience for important people. Sometimes it becomes necessary to help children understand the difference between fantasy and reality. The younger man moved closer to Rose's bed, his hand drifting toward the 4-line. Zara's blood turned to ice as she realized what they were planning. Don't touch her. Zara jumped up, placing herself between the men and her grandmother. She's sick. She needs rest. Yes, she does need rest, Stevens agreed softly. Eternal rest. And you, little girl, need to learn when to keep your mouth shut. That's when the fire alarm went off. The piercing wail filled the hospital corridors as emergency lights began flashing. Stevens cursed under his breath while his partner looked around in confusion. In the chaos, Rose gripped Zara's arm with desperate strength. Run, baby. Run and don't look back. Get those papers and find someone who'll listen. Find that boy, Marcus. He deserves to know the truth about what his daddy did. I won't leave you. Go. Rose's voice held more power than it had in months. This is bigger than both of us now. You got to be strong, Zara. Strong like your mama should have lived to be. The sprinkler system activated, sending cascades of water throughout the hospital. In the confusion of alarms and shouting staff, Zara kissed her grandmother's forehead and slipped past the two men, who were too busy trying to figure out if this was a real emergency or an elaborate setup. She ran through corridors filled with panicking patients and staff, her sneakers slipping on the wet linoleum. Behind her, she could hear Stevens shouting orders, but the chaos of the hospital worked in her favor. She knew these halls, had spent months navigating them during Rose's treatments. The emergency exit led to an alley behind the hospital. Zara burst through the door and immediately turned toward home, her lungs burning as she ran through the maze of Riverside's narrow streets. Every shadow could hide an enemy. Every car that slowed down could be coming for her. The apartment she shared with Rose was on the third floor of a building that had seen better decades. Zara took the stairs 3 at a time, her heart hammering against her ribs. The hallway smelled like cooking grease and broken dreams, but it was home. Inside their tiny apartment, everything looked exactly as they'd left it that morning, Rose's teacup still sitting on the kitchen table, Zara's homework scattered across the couch. Normal. Safe. But safety was an illusion now. Zara dropped to her knees beside the refrigerator and pried up the loose floorboard with shaking fingers. The coffee tin was exactly where Rose had said it would be, wrapped in plastic and sealed with electrical tape. Inside were dozens of documents, medical records, birth certificates, internal company memos, photographs of contaminated water samples. And there, at the bottom of the stack, was a birth certificate for Marcus Jonathan Whitmore, born at St. Mary's Hospital, with a note in Rose's careful handwriting, chemical exposure in utero confirmed. Father's company responsible. Mother tested positive for industrial toxins. Zara stared at the papers, understanding flooding through her like ice water. The lonely boy she'd met at the gates that afternoon was living proof of his father's crimes. And somewhere in this city, powerful men were deciding how far they'd go to keep that proof buried. She stuffed the documents into her messenger bag, grabbed a few clothes and the small amount of cash Rose kept hidden in a mason jar. She couldn't stay here. They'd come looking, and when they did, a sound in the hallway made her freeze. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, stopping outside their door. 3 soft knocks, then a pause, then 3 more. Not Rose's pattern. Not anyone friendly. Zara eased toward the fire escape window, her bag clutched against her chest. Through the thin walls, she could hear voices, male, professional, deadly calm. Check every room. Find anything that looks like medical records. And if the girl comes back. She didn't wait to hear the rest. The fire escape's metal rungs were slick with autumn rain, but Zara climbed down with the desperation of someone who knew that falling was better than being caught. From the alley below, she looked up at her apartment windows and saw flashlight beams sweeping through the rooms where she'd spent the happiest years of her short life. Soon they'd find the hiding place. Soon they'd know she had the evidence. But for now, she was free. Free and alone and carrying enough explosive truth to bring down one of the most powerful men in the country. The question was, what did a 10-year-old girl do with that kind of power? As she walked through the rain-slicked streets of Riverside, past the boarded-up houses and the contaminated playground where her mother had played as a child, Zara made a decision that would change everything. She was going back to Beacon Hill. Back to those gates where she'd met the lonely boy with the sad eyes. Marcus Whitmore deserved to know what his father had done. And together, maybe they could find a way to make the powerful pay for the sins they thought money could wash away. Behind her, in the hospital, Rose Johnson's heart monitor flatlined at exactly 11:47 p.m., just as 2 men in expensive suits were explaining to the night nurse how tragic it was when elderly patients suffered sudden cardiac events during fire alarm evacuations. But Zara didn't know that yet. She was already 3 blocks away, walking toward a destiny that would test everything she believed about justice, friendship, and the courage it takes to stand up to monsters who wear human faces. The game was no longer just beginning. It had begun. If you are enjoying this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Chapter 3. The Whitmore estate looked different in the pre-dawn darkness, less like a fairy tale palace and more like what it truly was, a fortress designed to keep the world at bay. Zara crouched in the shadows across the street, her messenger bag pressed against her chest like armor, watching the patterns of the security guards as they made their rounds. She'd been there for 2 hours, learning their schedule, counting the seconds between their patrol sweeps. 47 minutes between passes. Enough time, if she was fast enough and brave enough. The brick wall surrounding the estate was 12 feet high, topped with decorative iron spikes that weren't nearly as decorative as they looked. But Zara had grown up in Riverside, where chain-link fences were just suggestions and abandoned buildings were playgrounds for children who learned early that sometimes you had to climb to survive. At 5:23 a.m., as the eastern sky began to blush with the first hints of dawn, she made her move. The oak tree by the northern wall was old enough to remember when this land had been farmland instead of a monument to wealth. Its branches stretched over the barrier like arthritic fingers, and Zara climbed them with the fluid grace of someone who'd been scaling obstacles her entire life. She dropped into the manicured garden with barely a sound, landing in a crouch behind a marble fountain that probably cost more than her entire neighborhood earned in a year. The grounds were vast and perfectly maintained, not a single leaf out of place, not one blade of grass longer than the rest. It was beautiful and sterile and completely lifeless. Zara made her way toward the house, using the landscaping for cover. Somewhere in that massive structure was Marcus Whitmore, the boy with the sad eyes, the living proof of his father's crimes. The boy who deserved to know the truth about what had been stolen from him. She found him on the same marble terrace where they'd first met, sitting in his wheelchair with a book in his lap, watching the sunrise paint the city in shades of gold and amber. Even from a distance, she could see the loneliness that clung to him like a second skin. "You came back," he said without turning around, his voice barely above a whisper. Zara froze, surprised. "How did you know I was here?" Marcus finally looked at her, and she saw something in his expression that hadn't been there yesterday, a flicker of hope warring with deep suspicion. "I've been watching for you. Every morning since yesterday. I didn't think. I mean, nobody ever comes back." She stepped out from behind the rose bushes, acutely aware of how out of place she looked in this perfect setting. Her jeans were clean but worn, her sneakers had holes in the toes, and her jacket was 3 sizes too big, a hand-me-down from some long-forgotten charity drive. "Why did you come back?" Marcus asked, and there was something raw in his voice, as if her answer might determine whether he'd allow himself to hope again. Zara studied his face, the sharp intelligence in his dark eyes, the way he held himself with careful dignity despite everything the world had taken from him. How could she tell him the truth? How could she explain that she was carrying evidence that would destroy everything he'd ever known about his family? "Because you looked lonely," she said finally. "And I know what that feels like." Marcus blinked, clearly not expecting such simple honesty. In his world, conversations were strategic maneuvers, carefully orchestrated exchanges designed to gain advantage or avoid disadvantage. Nobody just talked. "You could get in trouble being here," he warned. "My father, he doesn't like unexpected visitors." "Your father's not here," Zara said with more confidence than she felt. "I saw him leave yesterday in the black car. Haven't seen him come back." "How do you?" Marcus stopped, studying her more carefully. "You've been watching the house?" Before Zara could answer, the sound of approaching footsteps made them both turn. 2 security guards were rounding the corner of the mansion, their radios crackling with static. They moved with the purposeful stride of men who'd found exactly what they were looking for. "Young Master Marcus," the larger guard called out, his voice carefully respectful but firm. "Step away from the intruder, please." Marcus's jaw set in a stubborn line Zara was beginning to recognize. "She's not an intruder. She's my guest." "I'm afraid that's not how this works, sir." The second guard was already reaching for his radio, probably to call for backup. "Miss, you need to come with us. Now." Zara's mind raced. She couldn't let them catch her, not with Rose's documents in her bag, not when she was so close to finding answers. But there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide in this perfect, sterile landscape. That's when Marcus made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Follow me," he said quietly, spinning his wheelchair toward the house with surprising speed. "And whatever happens, don't let them separate us." Zara didn't hesitate. She grabbed the back of his chair and ran alongside him as he navigated toward what looked like a solid wall of ivy-covered stone. But as they got closer, she realized it wasn't solid at all. There was a narrow gap, hidden behind the trailing vines, just wide enough for a wheelchair. "How did you?" she gasped as they squeezed through. "I've had 8 years to explore every inch of this place," Marcus said grimly. "When you can't run outside to play, you learn to find other kinds of adventures." They emerged into a narrow service corridor that ran along the back of the mansion. The walls were plain white plaster instead of marble, and the floors were simple concrete, the working guts of a house designed to look magical from the outside. Behind them, shouts erupted as the guards discovered the hidden entrance. Heavy boots pounded against concrete, getting closer by the second. "This way," Marcus whispered, turning down a branching corridor that seemed to lead deeper into the bowels of the house. "There's a whole network of passages back here. The original owner built them during Prohibition. He was smuggling alcohol." They moved through a maze of hidden doorways and narrow staircases, Marcus navigating with the confidence of someone who'd mapped every secret the house contained. Zara marveled at how quietly his wheelchair moved, how expertly he handled the tight corners and sudden turns. "Here," he said, pressing a section of wall that swung inward to reveal a small room lined with books. "My secret hideout. They'll never think to look here." The room was clearly Marcus's private sanctuary, filled with adventure novels and science textbooks, art supplies, and half-finished inventions. It was the first space in the house that felt alive, that showed evidence of dreams and imagination. Zara collapsed into a beanbag chair, her heart hammering against her ribs. "That was incredible. How do you know all those passages?" "Practice," Marcus said simply. "When you spend most of your time alone, you get creative about finding places to hide." They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the distant sounds of guards searching other parts of the house. Gradually, the noise faded as the search moved further away. "They'll give up eventually," Marcus said. "Father's not here to push them, and they won't want to tear the house apart looking for one kid." Zara shifted her messenger bag, and papers rustled inside. Marcus's sharp eyes caught the sound. "What's in there?" he asked. This was the moment Zara had been both dreading and hoping for. The moment when she'd have to decide how much truth a lonely 8-year-old boy could handle. "Documents," she said carefully. About things that happened a long time ago. Things that affected a lot of people." Marcus leaned forward, his curiosity clearly piqued. "What kind of things?" Zara pulled out some of the less explosive papers, birth certificates, hospital records that wouldn't immediately reveal the full scope of the conspiracy. But as she shifted through them, looking for something safe to show him, disaster struck. Her mother's medical file slipped from the stack, falling open on the floor between them. The Whitmore Industries letterhead was clearly visible, along with chemical analysis reports and a death certificate listing environmental carcinoma as the cause of death. Marcus stared at the papers, his face going pale. That's my father's company. Why do you have documents with my father's company name on them?" Zara scrambled to gather the papers, but it was too late. Marcus had seen enough to know that whatever she was carrying, it was connected to his family in ways he didn't understand. "It's complicated," she said desperately. "I can't. I mean, you wouldn't understand." "I'm not stupid," Marcus said quietly, and there was a hurt in his voice that cut Zara to the bone. "I know my father's business hurts people sometimes. All big businesses do. But what does that have to do with you?" Before Zara could answer, the sound of a car engine echoed from the front of the house. Expensive, powerful, familiar. Marcus's face went white. "Father's back," he whispered. They looked at each other across the scattered papers, and in that moment, both children realized that their lives had just become infinitely more complicated. Whatever game they'd stumbled into, whatever secrets those documents contained, they were in it together now. Footsteps echoed in the main hallway above them, measured, purposeful, heading directly for Jonathan Whitmore's study. Within minutes, he'd discover that security had been breached, that someone had been on the grounds, that his son had been involved. And somewhere in the hidden room behind the wall, 2 children sat surrounded by evidence that could destroy empires, neither fully understanding the magnitude of the forces they'd just set in motion. Jonathan Whitmore stood in his study, staring at the medical file that had been hastily retrieved from the servants' quarters. His face was carved from granite, revealing nothing of the volcanic rage building behind his steel-gray eyes. Stephen stood at attention beside the massive desk, his expensive suit wrinkled from the morning's unsuccessful search. "The girl got away, sir. But she left this behind." Jonathan's fingers traced the Whitmore Industries letterhead, then moved to the name on the death certificate, Maria Elena Johnson. Below that, in smaller print, survived by daughter, Zara Johnson, age 10. Rose Johnson's granddaughter, he said softly, the words dropping into the silence like stones into still water. The nurse who was there when Marcus was born. The one who kept records. What are your orders, sir? Jonathan walked to the window overlooking his perfect gardens, where his son had been playing just hours earlier with a girl who carried the power to destroy everything they'd built. Behind the carefully constructed facade of his face, calculations were spinning, risk assessments, damage control scenarios, permanent solutions to temporary problems. He picked up his secure phone and dialed a number he'd hoped never to use again. "It's me," he said when the call connected. "The situation has escalated beyond containment. The Johnson girl is here, in my house, carrying evidence. She's made contact with my son." A pause, then a voice like grinding stone. "How do you want this handled?" Jonathan closed his eyes, thinking of his son's laughter echoing through the secret passages, the first genuine joy he'd heard from the boy in years. Then he thought of prison walls, congressional hearings, the empire his grandfather had built crumbling into dust and lawsuits. "Handle this permanently," he said into the phone. "All of it. Tonight." The call ended with a soft click that sounded like a coffin closing. Somewhere in the house, Marcus was probably showing his new friend his treasures, sharing the loneliness he'd carried for 8 years. He had no idea that his father was planning to ensure that loneliness would be permanent. And deep in the city, in a hospital room that smelled of disinfectant and broken dreams, Rose Johnson's body was growing cold while 2 men in expensive suits explained to the night supervisor why elderly patients sometimes experienced sudden cardiac events during stressful situations. The game had moved beyond simple corporate cover-ups now. It had become a war. If you are enjoying this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Chapter 4. 3 weeks after their first meeting, Zara had mapped every secret passage in the Whitmore mansion almost as well as Marcus himself. They met every morning at dawn, slipping through the hidden entrance by the ivy-covered wall, retreating to Marcus's sanctuary where the adult world couldn't reach them. For Marcus, it was like discovering color after a lifetime of gray. Zara didn't see his wheelchair or his missing leg. She saw someone who knew every hiding spot in a fortress, who could solve math problems that stumped high school students, who had read more books than most college graduates. When she looked at him, he felt whole. "Show me the one about marine biology again," Zara said, sprawled across the floor of the hidden room with a textbook open in front of her. The morning light filtering through the small window caught the beads in her braids, making them shine like captured rainbows. Marcus pulled the thick volume from his personal library, watching as Zara's eyes lit up at the pictures of deep-sea creatures. Her hunger for knowledge was unlike anything he'd ever encountered. She devoured information like someone who'd been starving for it her entire life. "Did you know that some fish create their own light?" she asked, tracing her finger along a photograph of an anglerfish. "It's called bioluminescence. They use it to hunt in the darkness." "Like a living flashlight," Marcus said, rolling his chair closer to look at the book with her. "I never thought of it that way." Zara had a gift for seeing things from angles that never occurred to him. She turned complex scientific concepts into stories, made mathematics feel like magic, transformed his careful collection of facts into adventures waiting to happen. "When I grow up," she said dreamily, "I'm going to be a marine biologist. I'll dive to the bottom of the ocean and discover new species. Maybe find creatures that nobody's ever seen before." Marcus felt a pang of something that might have been envy. Zara spoke about the future with such confidence, such certainty that the world would bend to accommodate her dreams. He'd never dared to dream beyond the walls of his father's estate. "What about you?" she asked, looking up from the book. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Marcus had been groomed his entire life to take over Whitmore Industries, to follow in his father's footsteps, to inherit an empire built on secrets he was only beginning to understand. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I've never really thought about it. My father says I'll run the company someday, but what do you want to do?" Such a simple question. Such a dangerous one. Marcus looked around his hidden sanctuary, at the art supplies he'd never had anyone to create with, the science experiments he'd never had anyone to share with, the books full of adventures he'd never had anyone to discuss. Maybe I'd like to be a teacher, he said quietly, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. Help other kids learn things. Make them excited about discovering stuff. Zara's smile was like sunrise breaking over the horizon. You'd be great at that. You explain things so they make sense. And you're patient, not like the teachers at my school who act like we're stupid just because we're poor. Her expression darkened at the mention of school, and Marcus noticed something he'd been trying to ignore for days. Zara was getting thinner. Her clothes hung looser on her small frame, and there were shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there when they first met. Are you okay? He asked carefully. You seem tired lately. Zara's bright smile flickered, and for a moment Marcus caught a glimpse of something raw and frightened underneath. But then the mask slipped back into place, and she was animated again, deflecting with questions about his latest art project. Marcus didn't push, but he started bringing extra food to their morning meetings, pastries from the kitchen, fruit from the private greenhouse, sandwiches wrapped in cloth napkins. He told himself it was just sharing, just wanting to give his friends something special. But deep down, he recognized the signs of hunger from the books he'd read about poverty, from the documentaries he'd watched about children in developing countries. He just couldn't understand why those signs were appearing in someone who lived 20 minutes away from his mansion. What Marcus didn't know was that his father's war against Zara Johnson had begun the day after their first meeting. It started subtly. Rose Johnson, who had worked as a part-time janitor at St. Mary's Hospital for the past 5 years, was suddenly terminated for budget cuts. The supervisor who delivered the news couldn't quite meet her eyes, and when Rose asked about severance pay, she was told there had been irregularities in her employment records. The rent increase came next. A notice slipped under their door announcing that their monthly payment was doubling, effective immediately. When Rose tried to argue, the landlord, Mr. Kozlov, just shrugged and said the building was being upgraded to market rate. He suggested they might be more comfortable in a different neighborhood. Then social services arrived. Miss Patricia Hendricks knocked on their door on a Tuesday morning, clipboard in hand and concern painted across her face like makeup. She was young, blonde, and clearly uncomfortable with the narrow hallways and cracked walls of the Riverside apartments. I'm here about a report concerning Zara Johnson, she said, consulting her notes. There are concerns about her living situation, her attendance at school, possible neglect issues. Rose's hands shook as she invited the social worker inside their small apartment. Everything was clean but worn, organized but obviously poor. Miss Hendricks took notes about the threadbare furniture, the single bedroom they shared, the refrigerator that hummed too loudly and contained mostly generic brands and day-old bread. Where has Zara been in the mornings? Miss Hendricks asked. Her teacher reports multiple absences. She's been helping me, Rose said carefully. Since I lost my job, things have been difficult. She runs errands, helps with shopping. Children need to be in school, Mrs. Johnson. Education is not optional. What Rose couldn't explain, what she didn't dare explain, was that Zara had been disappearing every morning, slipping out before dawn and returning with stories about books and science experiments and a lonely boy who shared his breakfast with her. Rose had tried to ask where she was going, but Zara had just said she was learning things and making a friend. Given everything that had happened, the job loss, the rent increase, the way their lives seemed to be unraveling with surgical precision, Rose had been afraid to push too hard. Afraid that asking too many questions might draw attention to the coffee tin hidden under the floorboards, the evidence that powerful people were clearly trying very hard to bury. Grandmother's sick again, Zara told Marcus one morning, her voice small and frightened. They were sitting in his sanctuary, but she couldn't seem to focus on the astronomy book they'd been reading together. What kind of sick? Marcus asked, rolling his chair closer to where she sat curled up in the beanbag. The heart kind. She has to take pills now, and sometimes she gets dizzy and has to sit down really fast. The doctor says it's stress, but... Zara's voice trailed off. But what? But she's scared all the time now. She keeps checking the locks on the door, and she jumps whenever someone knocks. Last night I heard her crying, and when I asked what was wrong, she just hugged me really tight and said she was sorry. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. In his world, adults didn't cry unless something was very, very wrong. And they definitely didn't apologize to children unless they were afraid they couldn't protect them anymore. Maybe I could help, he said impulsively. I have money, well, my father has money. Maybe we could pay for better doctors, or... No. Zara's voice was sharp, almost frightened. You can't tell your father about me. Promise me, Marcus. Promise you won't tell him anything about where I live or about Grandmother Rose. Why not? He helps people sometimes. The company has charities. Promise me. There was something in Zara's eyes that Marcus had never seen before, not just fear, but a kind of desperate terror that made his chest feel tight. I promise, he said quietly. But Zara, if you need help. I know. She managed a weak smile. And having you as a friend, it's the best thing that's happened to me in a long time. Even when everything else feels like it's falling apart. Marcus reached over and squeezed her hand, wishing he could do more, wishing he understood why the world seemed determined to hurt the only person who'd ever wanted to be his friend. The phone call came at 2:17 a.m. on a Thursday night. Rose Johnson woke to the sound of her landline ringing, harsh and insistent in the darkness of their small bedroom. Zara stirred in the bed beside her but didn't wake fully. She'd learned to sleep through most disturbances in their neighborhood. Hello? Rose's voice was thick with sleep and medication. Rose Johnson. It wasn't a question. The voice was male, professional, cold as winter rain. You've been a very difficult woman to locate. Rose sat up straighter, her heart beginning to race in a way that had nothing to do with her medical condition. Who is this? How did you get this number? We need to have a conversation, Mrs. Johnson. About old files, old secrets, old promises that should have been kept. I don't know what you're talking about. But she did know, and they both knew she knew. Tomorrow evening. 7 o'clock. The playground on 5th Street, the one with the broken swings. Come alone, and bring anything you might have saved from your nursing days. Medical records, birth certificates, photographs. Everything. The line went dead before Rose could respond. She sat in the darkness, listening to Zara's peaceful breathing, and felt the walls of 30 years of careful silence finally beginning to crumble. She'd always known this day would come, had always known that secrets this explosive couldn't stay buried forever. But she'd hoped she'd have more time. Time to prepare Zara, time to find someone who would listen, time to ensure that her granddaughter would be safe when the reckoning finally arrived. Now, looking at the clock glowing 2:19 a.m., Rose Johnson realized that time had just run out. The next evening, Rose made her way to the abandoned playground with legs that felt like they were carrying her to her own execution. The broken swings creaked in the autumn wind, and the rusted slide looked like a metal gravestone in the fading light. 2 men waited for her in the shadows, expensive suits, cold eyes, the kind of professional calm that came from years of making problems disappear. Mrs. Johnson, the taller one said. Thank you for coming. What do you want? Rose's voice was steady, but her hands shook as she gripped her purse. We want to make a deal. You have something that belongs to us, and we have something that belongs to you. I don't. Your granddaughter's future. The words cut through Rose's protest like a blade. Social services is very concerned about her living situation. And there have been questions about your fitness as a guardian, given your recent health issues. Rose's world tilted sideways. You can't, she's all I have. Custody battles can be very expensive, very public, very ugly. Especially when there are concerns about a child's safety, her education, her exposure to inappropriate influences. The message was clear: give us what we want, or lose Zara forever. Rose reached into her purse with trembling fingers and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside were copies, not the originals, but enough to satisfy immediate demands while buying time to figure out how to protect her granddaughter. Smart woman, the second man said, taking the envelope. Now, about ensuring this stays our little secret. That's when Rose felt the sharp pain in her chest, radiating down her left arm like lightning. The stress, the fear, the weight of 30 years of carrying toxic secrets, it all crashed down on her at once. She collapsed onto the broken playground equipment, gasping for air that wouldn't come, her vision graying at the edges. "Call an ambulance," she heard one of the men say, but his voice sounded far away, distorted by the roaring in her ears. As the world faded around her, Rose Johnson managed to whisper 4 words that would haunt her granddaughter forever. "The box, under the floorboards." And then, as sirens wailed in the distance, "Don't trust the Whitmores." The last thing she saw before the darkness took her was one of the men making a phone call, his voice calm and professional as he reported mission accomplished. In a hidden room in a mansion across the city, 2 children were reading about bioluminescent creatures that created light in the deepest darkness, neither knowing that their own world was about to be plunged into shadows that might never lift. The war had claimed its first casualty. But the battle was far from over. If you are enjoying this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Chapter 5. The fluorescent lights in Riverside General's waiting room hummed like trapped insects, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow that made even healthy people look corpse pale. Zara sat in a plastic chair that had seen better decades, her legs too short to touch the floor, swinging back and forth in a nervous rhythm that matched the beeping of machines somewhere down the hall. "Your grandmother is stable for now," Dr. Martinez had said an hour ago, his kind eyes unable to hide the gravity behind his words. "But the next 24 hours are critical." The heart attack was severe, and at her age. He hadn't needed to finish the sentence. Zara understood perfectly. Rose Johnson was dying, and there was nothing a 10-year-old girl could do to stop it. "Is there someone we can call?" the social worker had asked, not Miss Hendricks this time, but a different woman with tired eyes and forms to fill out. "Other family members? Friends who might take you in temporarily?" Zara had shaken her head, not trusting her voice. There was no one else. There had never been anyone else except Rose, and now even that fragile anchor was slipping away. "We'll have to contact Child Protective Services," the woman had said gently. "You can't stay alone, sweetheart. It's not safe." But Zara had slipped away while the adults were busy with paperwork and medical consultations, disappearing into the maze of hospital corridors like smoke. She'd learned long ago that sometimes the only person you could count on was yourself. Now, 3 hours later, she stood outside the apartment building where she'd spent the happiest years of her life, keys trembling in her hands as she climbed the familiar stairs for what might be the last time. The apartment felt different without Rose's presence, hollow, like an echo of home rather than home itself. Zara moved through the small rooms, touching familiar objects that suddenly seemed fragile and temporary. Rose's reading glasses on the kitchen table. Her favorite coffee mug in the sink. The afghan she'd been knitting for Zara's birthday, needles still holding half-finished stitches. The box, under the floorboards. Rose's whispered words echoed in Zara's memory as she knelt beside the refrigerator and pried up the loose board with shaking fingers. The coffee tin was still there, wrapped in plastic and sealed with electrical tape, heavier than she remembered. Inside were documents that would change her understanding of everything. Medical records from St. Mary's Hospital, dating back 10 years. Birth certificates. Laboratory reports showing elevated levels of industrial chemicals in drinking water. Internal memos from Whitmore Industries discussing acceptable contamination levels and cost-benefit analyses of remediation versus litigation management. And photographs. Dozens of them. Pictures of the Riverside water treatment facility with pipes clearly leaking into the surrounding soil. Images of dead fish floating in the river that supplied the neighborhood's drinking water. Children playing in playgrounds built on contaminated ground, their faces bright with innocent joy, unaware that every breath was slowly poisoning them. At the bottom of the stack was a folder labeled M. Whitmore, Confidential. Inside, Zara found Marcus's birth certificate, medical records from his delivery, and a laboratory report that made her blood turn to ice. Patient, Marcus Jonathan Whitmore. Mother's blood chemistry, elevated levels of industrial solvents consistent with TCE contamination. Estimated exposure, 12 to 16 weeks gestation. Probable cause of limb malformation, environmental teratogen exposure. Below that, in Rose's careful handwriting, father's company dumping chemicals for 8 years before this birth. Mother consumed contaminated water during charity visit to Riverside. Company aware of contamination but chose cover-up over cleanup. Zara stared at the papers until the words blurred through her tears. Marcus, her Marcus, with his gentle smile and patient explanations and desperate hunger for friendship, was a victim just like her mother. Just like half the neighborhood. Just like everyone who'd ever trusted that the water flowing from their taps was safe to drink. His father hadn't just covered up a crime. He'd maimed his own son to protect his profits. The sound of footsteps in the hallway outside made Zara freeze. Heavy boots, multiple sets, moving with purpose toward her door. She scrambled to shove the documents back into the coffee tin, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. 3 sharp knocks echoed through the apartment. Zara Johnson? This is building management. We need to inspect the apartment for water damage. It was a lie. Zara had lived here long enough to know that Mr. Kozlov never sent anyone to inspect anything, and he certainly didn't care about water damage in units he was trying to empty anyway. She grabbed the coffee tin and her messenger bag, moving quietly toward the fire escape window. Behind her, she heard the unmistakable sound of metal tools working on the door lock. The fire escape was a rusted skeleton clinging to the side of the building, groaning under her weight as she climbed down. From her apartment window above, she could see flashlight beams sweeping through the rooms where she'd grown up, methodically searching every corner, every hiding place. They were looking for evidence. Which meant they knew she had it. Zara reached the alley and ran. The city at night was a different creature than the one she knew in daylight, darker, more dangerous, full of shadows that could hide predators or refuge depending on your luck. Zara moved through the maze of Riverside's narrow streets like a ghost, using every shortcut and hidey hole she discovered in 10 years of exploring her neighborhood. Behind her, she could hear the sound of pursuit, car engines, radio chatter, the organized efficiency of people who were very good at finding things that didn't want to be found. But they didn't know these streets the way she did. They didn't understand that in a neighborhood like Riverside, every kid learned how to disappear when necessary. She ducked through the gap in the chain-link fence behind Miller's grocery, crawled through the drainage tunnel under Elm Street, and emerged 6 blocks away near the bus stop where commuters waited for rides to better neighborhoods. From there, she could see the lights of Beacon Hill glowing like a distant city on a mountain. Marcus would be asleep by now, safe in his fortress of wealth and privilege, unaware that his father was the monster who'd stolen so much from both of them. How could she tell him? How could she destroy the only friendship either of them had ever known? But as she walked toward the wealthy district where Marcus lived his isolated life, Zara realized she didn't have a choice. The truth was bigger than their friendship, bigger than her fear of losing the only person who'd ever seen her as more than just another poor kid from the wrong side of town. Marcus deserved to know what his father had done. And maybe, if they worked together, they could find a way to make the adults listen. To make Jonathan Whitmore pay for the lives he'd destroyed in the name of profit margins and quarterly reports. The Whitmore estate looked different in the darkness, less like a fairy tale palace and more like what it truly was, a fortress built on blood money, designed to keep the world's victims from reaching the people who'd victimized them. But Zara knew its secrets now. She climbed the oak tree with practiced ease, dropped into the manicured gardens, and made her way toward the hidden entrance by the ivy-covered wall. That's when she heard the voices. Jonathan Whitmore was in his study, speaking on what sounded like a secure phone line. His voice carried through the open window, cold and businesslike as he discussed logistics that made Zara's blood freeze. The hospital situation is contained, he was saying. The old woman won't wake up, and if she does, who's going to believe a senile nurse with a history of heart problems? Zara crept closer to the window, pressing herself against the marble wall below the sill. The girl is the real problem now. She has the documents, our people confirmed it when they searched the apartment. She's smart, resourceful, and she's already made contact with Marcus. A pause, then, no, we can't risk exposure by involving more people. This needs to be handled quietly, permanently. Make it look like an accident, a runaway who got into trouble on the streets. These things happen all the time in neighborhoods like Riverside. Zara felt the world tilt sideways. They weren't just going to silence her. They were going to kill her. And they were going to make it look like just another tragic statistic from the poor side of town. What about your son? The voice on the other end must have asked. Marcus will grieve, of course. But he's resilient. And once this is over, once there's no more evidence floating around, we can focus on his future. On preparing him to take over the company someday. The casual way he discussed his son's feelings, as if Marcus's grief were just another variable to be managed, made Zara's stomach turn. This man wasn't just a criminal. He was a monster who saw people as obstacles to be removed or assets to be exploited. Find her tonight, Jonathan continued. She can't have gone far, and she can't stay hidden forever. A 10-year-old girl alone on the streets won't last long anyway. Just make sure it's quick. The call ended, and Zara heard footsteps moving across the study. In a few minutes, Jonathan would probably check on Marcus, play the role of the loving father while planning the murder of his son's only friend. She had to warn Marcus. Had to tell him everything before his father's people found her. Zara slipped through the hidden entrance and navigated the familiar passages toward Marcus's sanctuary. But as she rounded the corner that led to his secret room, she nearly collided with Marcus himself, who was wheeling through the corridor with the quiet confidence of someone who knew every inch of his domain. Zara? His face lit up with surprise and joy. What are you doing here so late? I thought you said your grandmother was. He stopped, really looking at her for the first time. Taking in her tear-streaked face, her torn jacket, the desperate fear she couldn't hide anymore. What happened? He asked softly. What's wrong? Behind them, somewhere in the main house, a door closed with the solid thunk of expensive wood and precision craftsmanship. Jonathan Whitmore was moving through his domain, probably heading to his son's room to check on him before implementing his final solution to the Zara problem. She looked at Marcus, this boy who'd given her friendship and hope and the first taste of what learning could be like when you had access to resources and encouragement. This boy who was about to discover that his father was a murderer, that his entire life was built on a foundation of poisoned ground and buried secrets. Marcus, she whispered, pulling the coffee tin from her bag with trembling hands. There's something you need to know about your father. Something terrible. And in the hidden passages of a mansion built on blood money, two children prepared to confront truths that would change everything they thought they knew about justice, family. And the price of silence in a world where money could buy almost anything, including the right to destroy lives without consequence. The moment of revelation had arrived, and there would be no going back. If you are enjoying this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Chapter 6. Marcus stared at the documents spread across the floor of his hidden sanctuary, his face cycling through expressions like a time-lapse photograph of innocence dying. Confusion gave way to horror, horror to disbelief, and finally disbelief to a kind of hollow recognition that made Zara's heart break. This can't be real, he whispered, his fingers hovering over his own birth certificate as if it might burn him. My father, he couldn't. But even as he spoke the words, Zara could see the terrible logic clicking into place behind his dark eyes. The way his father had always been so controlling about his medical care, insisting on private doctors who asked no questions. The way conversations stopped when Marcus entered a room. The way his mother sometimes looked at him with a sadness so profound it seemed to have its own gravity. The contamination happened before you were born, Zara said gently, kneeling beside his wheelchair. Your father's company was dumping chemicals in the river that fed our neighborhood's water supply. When your mother visited Riverside for that charity event. She drank the water, Marcus finished, his voice barely audible. And it did this to me. He gestured at his missing leg with a kind of detached clinical precision, as if he were discussing someone else's medical condition. But Zara could see the devastation in his eyes, the way his entire understanding of himself was crumbling like a building with rotten foundations. My condition isn't genetic, he said flatly. It's not some cruel twist of fate or bad luck. It's because my father chose profit over people's lives. Including mine. Zara reached for his hand, but Marcus pulled away, wheeling his chair backward until he hit the wall of books that had been his refuge for so many years. And your mother, he said, looking at Zara with something that might have been accusation or might have been grief. She died because of him too. Yes. The word came out smaller than Zara had intended. How long have you known? The question hung between them like a blade. Zara thought about lying, about softening the truth, but Marcus deserved better than that. Since last night. My grandmother had been keeping the evidence hidden for years, waiting for the right time to use it. She was trying to protect me, but when your father's people started pressuring her. My father's people. Marcus's voice was hollow. They killed her, didn't they? Your grandmother? Zara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Marcus sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the documents that had shattered his world. When he finally looked up, his expression had hardened into something Zara had never seen before, a kind of cold determination that reminded her uncomfortably of his father. We have to confront him, he said. Marcus, no. He needs to know that we know. He needs to understand that this ends now. Before Zara could stop him, Marcus was wheeling toward the door, moving with the kind of purposeful energy that comes from finally having a clear enemy to face. Zara grabbed the documents and ran after him, her heart pounding with dread. They found Jonathan Whitmore in his study, sitting behind his massive mahogany desk like a king holding court. He looked up as Marcus burst through the door, his expression shifting from mild annoyance to sharp alertness as he took in his son's tear-streaked face and the girl who followed behind him. Marcus, Jonathan said carefully, it's very late. You should be in bed. I know what you did. Marcus's voice was steady, but Zara could see his hands trembling as he gripped the arms of his wheelchair. I know about the chemicals, about the cover-up, about what happened to my mother when she was pregnant. Jonathan's face went very still. I see. And where exactly did you come by this information? Marcus gestured toward Zara, who stepped forward with the coffee tin clutched against her chest like armor. She has proof. Medical records, internal company memos, photographs. Everything. Jonathan's gaze shifted to Zara, and she felt like a mouse being studied by a snake. Ah, Miss Johnson. I wondered when you might turn up again. I trust your grandmother is comfortable in the hospital? The casual cruelty in his voice made Zara's blood boil. You killed her. You and your men, you gave her a heart attack. I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about. Jonathan's smile was sharp as a scalpel. Elderly people have health problems. It's tragic, but hardly unusual. Don't. Marcus's word cracked like a whip. Don't lie to me anymore. I've had enough lies for one lifetime. Jonathan studied his son for a moment, then seemed to come to some internal decision. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers in a gesture that managed to be both casual and threatening. Very well, he said. Yes, the company made some regrettable environmental decisions in the past. Yes, those decisions had unintended consequences. And yes, I've spent considerable time and resources managing the fallout from those consequences. Managing the fallout? Marcus's voice rose. You mean covering up the fact that you poisoned an entire neighborhood? That you're responsible for dozens of deaths, including your condition. Jonathan's interruption was clinical, matter of fact. Yes, Marcus. I'm aware of the irony. The casual admission hit Marcus like a physical blow. Whatever part of him had still been hoping for denial, for some explanation that would make this all make sense, died in that moment. How can you just sit there? Marcus whispered. How can you act like it doesn't matter? Because it doesn't matter, Jonathan said simply. What's done is done. The past can't be changed, but the future can be protected. Everything I've done, every difficult decision, every necessary compromise, has been to protect this family. To protect you. By murdering people? By making sure that the mistakes of the past don't destroy everything we've built for the future. Jonathan's voice hardened. Do you think your life would be better if I were in prison? Do you think your mother would be happier living in some government housing project while lawyers picked apart everything we own? Do you think this crusade for justice would somehow give you back your leg? The words hit their target with surgical precision. Marcus flinched as if he'd been slapped, and Zara saw his resolve wavering. The girl is using you, Jonathan continued, pressing his advantage. She's filled your head with stories designed to turn you against your own family. She wants to destroy us, Marcus. Destroy everything we are, everything we've worked for. She wants revenge, and she's willing to sacrifice you to get it. That's not true, Zara protested, but even she could hear how weak her voice sounded. Isn't it? Jonathan turned his attention to her with laser focus. You've known about this alleged evidence for how long? Days? Weeks? And in all that time, did you ever think to tell Marcus the truth? Or did you wait until you needed something from him? Zara felt her cheeks burn. The accusation was unfair, but it contained just enough truth to sting. She had waited. She had let Marcus care about her, let him share his food and his books and his desperate loneliness, all while knowing that his father was the monster who'd destroyed her family. I was trying to protect him, she said. By lying to him? By manipulating his emotions? By using his loneliness against him? Jonathan's smile was poisonous. You're just like every other person who's ever tried to get close to this family. You want something from us, and you're willing to hurt my son to get it. Marcus was staring at the floor now, his face a mask of confusion and pain. Zara could see Jonathan's words working like a virus in his mind, rewriting his understanding of their friendship, making him question everything he thought he knew about her motives. Marcus, she said desperately, you know me. You know I'm not. Do I? Marcus looked up at her, and his eyes were full of a hurt so profound it took her breath away. How do I know anything anymore? How do I know what's real? Before Zara could answer, the study door opened and Catherine Whitmore entered, moving with the quiet grace of someone who'd learned to navigate dangerous emotional territory. Marcus's mother was a small, elegant woman with prematurely gray hair and eyes that held depths of sadness. I heard voices, she said softly. Marcus, sweetheart, what are you doing up so late? Mother. Marcus's voice cracked on the word. Did you know? About the chemicals, about what father's company did? Catherine's face went very pale, but her expression didn't show surprise. It showed the terrible resignation of someone whose worst fears had finally come to pass. Yes, she said simply. I've known for years. The admission fell into the room like a stone into still water, sending ripples of shock through everyone present. Even Jonathan looked genuinely surprised. Catherine, he began. No. Her voice was soft but implacable. I'm done being silent. I'm done being complicit. She moved to a bookshelf and pulled out what looked like a leather-bound photo album. But when she opened it on Jonathan's desk, Zara could see it wasn't photographs inside, it was documents. Hundreds of them, organized with obsessive care. I've been gathering evidence for 8 years, Catherine said, her voice growing stronger with each word. Internal memos, financial records, medical reports that Jonathan thought were destroyed. I've documented every cover-up, every bribe, every life destroyed by my husband's choices. Jonathan stared at his wife as if she'd grown a second head. You, what? I was going to wait until Marcus was older, until he was strong enough to handle the truth. But I can't wait anymore. Catherine looked at her son with eyes full of love and regret. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I should have been braver sooner. I should have protected you from all of this. You knew, Marcus whispered, and you stayed with him? You let him. I stayed to gather evidence. I stayed to make sure that when the truth finally came out, there would be no way for him to escape justice. Catherine's hands shook as she turned pages in the album. Every birthday, every Christmas, every time I looked at what he'd taken from you, I documented another piece of his crimes. Jonathan's face had gone from surprise to calculation to something approaching panic. Catherine, you don't understand what you're doing. If this gets out. When this gets out, she corrected, our son will finally be free from the shadow of your choices. And maybe some of the families you destroyed will finally get justice. That's when Jonathan Whitmore showed his true nature. The transformation was instant and terrifying. One moment he was the composed businessman, the next he was something feral and desperate. He lunged across the desk, grabbing for the photo album, but Catherine was ready for him. "Security!" Jonathan shouted, even as he struggled with his wife for control of the evidence. "Code Black. Intruders in the main house." "Run," Catherine gasped, pushing the album toward Zara while fighting to keep Jonathan away from it. "Take the evidence and run. Both of you." But it was too late. The sound of running feet echoed through the mansion as Jonathan's private security team responded to his call. In moments, the study would be full of armed men whose loyalty was bought and paid for. "The passages," Marcus said, his voice suddenly clear and determined. "We can lose them in the passages." But as they turned toward the hidden door behind the bookshelf, Jonathan's voice stopped them cold. "Stevens," he barked into his phone. "Initiate Protocol 7. Full containment. No witnesses." Zara didn't know what Protocol 7 meant, but she could see from Catherine's horrified expression that it was nothing good. "Jonathan, no," Catherine whispered. "They're children. They're evidence," he replied coldly. "And evidence gets destroyed." The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in hellish red. Somewhere in the bowels of the mansion, Zara could hear the sound of heavy machinery starting up, industrial equipment that had no business being in a private home. "The basement," Catherine said, her face white with terror. "He's activating the industrial incinerator. He's going to." She didn't need to finish. They all understood. Jonathan Whitmore was willing to burn down his own house, with his own family inside, rather than let the truth about his crimes see daylight. The game had just become a fight for survival. And in the red-lit chaos of a mansion designed to protect secrets, 2 children and 1 brave mother prepared to battle a monster who happened to share their blood. If you are enjoying this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Chapter 7. The industrial incinerator in the Whitmore mansion's basement roared to life like a mechanical dragon, its furnace casting dancing shadows on the walls as temperatures climbed toward levels that could reduce bone to ash. Above the hellish machinery, Catherine Whitmore led 2 children through passages that had once hidden bootleggers' secrets but now concealed something far more deadly. "There's a service tunnel that leads to the garage," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rumble of machinery and the shouts of security guards searching the main floors. "If we can reach the cars." "No," Marcus said, his wheelchair navigating the narrow passage with practiced ease despite the chaos. "Father will have people watching all the exits. We need to get to his office at Whitmore Industries. That's where the original documents are stored, the ones that prove everything." Zara clutched Catherine's photo album against her chest, feeling the weight of 8 years' worth of carefully gathered evidence. "Why there? Why not just send what we have to the police?" "Because my father owns half the police department," Marcus said bitterly. "And the other half won't move against him without ironclad proof. But the company's servers have backups of everything: internal communications, financial records, environmental impact studies they thought were deleted. If we can access those files, we can upload them directly to every news outlet in the country," Catherine finished. "Make it impossible for him to contain or discredit the story." They reached the garage just as explosions began echoing through the mansion above them, controlled detonations designed to make the whole structure look like a tragic accident. Smoke was already beginning to seep through the ventilation system. "He's actually doing it," Catherine breathed, staring at the ceiling as if she could see through it to the home where she'd spent 15 years of her life. "He's burning everything down. Including us, if we don't move," Zara said grimly, helping Marcus transfer from his wheelchair to the driver's seat of Catherine's sedan. She'd seen him practice driving in the estate's private roads, hand controls compensating for his missing leg, reflexes sharp from years of video games and racing simulators. "I can't ask you to do this," Catherine said as Marcus started the engine. "You're children. This is too dangerous." "Grandmother Rose is in the hospital because of him," Zara interrupted, sliding into the passenger seat. "My mother is dead because of him. Marcus is missing a leg because of him. We're already in danger, we have been our whole lives. At least now we can fight back." Marcus looked at his mother in the rearview mirror, his young face set with determination that made him look far older than his 8 years. He stopped being my father the moment he decided our lives were acceptable casualties for his profit margins. Catherine's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded and climbed into the back seat. Then let's finish what I should have started years ago. The Whitmore Industries headquarters rose 47 stories into the Boston skyline, a monument to corporate power that dominated the financial district like a steel and glass middle finger pointed at the heavens. At 3:17 a.m., the building was mostly empty except for security guards and the night cleaning crew, Jonathan's army of lawyers and executives safely tucked away in their suburban homes, insulated from the consequences of their employers' crimes. Marcus used his father's private access codes to get them into the parking garage, his fingers steady on the keypad despite everything that had happened. The elevator to the executive floors required biometric scanning, but Marcus had been coming to this building since he could walk, or in his case, since he could roll. "Daddy's little prince," he said bitterly as the scanner accepted his palm print and retinal pattern. He wanted me to feel like this would all be mine someday. Guess he was right, just not the way he intended. The executive floor was a monument to expensive taste and questionable ethics, oil paintings worth more than most people's houses, furniture crafted from endangered wood species, windows that offered commanding views of a city that Jonathan Whitmore had spent decades poisoning for profit. Jonathan's private office was protected by multiple layers of security, but Marcus knew them all. The hidden safe behind the Monet reproduction. The secondary password for his father's computer system. The backup drives hidden in a hollowed-out law book that Jonathan thought was clever but Marcus had discovered during one of his childhood explorations. "There," Marcus said, his fingers flying over the keyboard as lines of code scrolled across multiple monitors. Financial records going back 15 years. Environmental impact studies. Internal communications about the Riverside contamination. All of it. Catherine worked at a second terminal, uploading files to a secure cloud server she'd set up years ago under a false identity. "I'm sending copies to the Boston Globe, the New York Times, the Washington Post, 60 Minutes, and every environmental watchdog group I can think of. By morning, this story will be everywhere." Zara stood watch by the windows, her sharp eyes scanning the streets below for any sign of Jonathan's security forces. The city looked peaceful from this height, twinkling lights and empty streets that gave no hint of the war being fought in the tower above. That's when she saw the convoy of black SUVs racing through the financial district, heading straight for their building. "They found us," she said. Marcus looked up from his computer, sweat beading on his forehead as progress bars crawled across his screen. 2 more minutes. "I need 2 more minutes to get the really damaging stuff uploaded." "We don't have 2 minutes, Zara said, watching the vehicles screech to a halt in front of the building. Men in tactical gear poured out, moving with military precision toward the lobby entrances. "Then we make our own time," Catherine said, her voice steel-hard with resolve. She moved to the building's fire control system and began entering override codes with practiced efficiency. "What are you doing?" Marcus asked. "Creating a diversion." Catherine's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Your father isn't the only one who knows how to use this building's systems against intruders." Emergency lights began flashing throughout the building as fire suppression systems activated on floors chosen seemingly at random. Water poured from sprinkler heads, soaking expensive carpets and short-circuiting electronic systems. Elevators locked down. Stairwell doors sealed automatically. Jonathan's security team found themselves trapped in a maze of flooded corridors and malfunctioning equipment, buying precious minutes for the upload to continue. "Got it," Marcus said as the final files transferred to the cloud servers. Every dirty secret, every covered-up crime, every life destroyed for the sake of quarterly profits. "It's all out there now." But even as he spoke, Zara could hear the sound of heavy equipment in the lobby below, industrial cutting tools making short work of the building's security measures. Whatever head start Catherine had bought them was rapidly disappearing. "There's a service elevator that goes to the roof," Catherine said. "Helicopter landing pad for executive transport. If we can reach it." The office doors exploded inward in a shower of wood splinters and smoke. Jonathan Whitmore strode through the wreckage like an avenging angel, his perfectly tailored suit torn and singed from the mansion fire, his eyes burning with the kind of rage that comes from watching an empire crumble. "Enough," he roared, and the single word seemed to shake the building's foundations. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you understand what you've destroyed?" "We've told the truth," Marcus said, his young voice steady despite the terror in his eyes. "Something you should have done years ago." "The truth?" Jonathan laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "The truth is that I built an empire that employs 50,000 people. The truth is that I created wealth and innovation and progress. The truth is that sometimes, great achievements require difficult sacrifices." "Those weren't sacrifices," Zara said, stepping protectively in front of Marcus's wheelchair. "Those were murders. Children born with defects. Families destroyed by cancer. Entire communities poisoned because you decided their lives were worth less than your profits." "Their lives were worth exactly what the market decided they were worth," Jonathan replied coldly. "That's how the world works, little girl. That's how it's always worked. The strong prosper, the weak suffer, and the smart know which side they want to be on." "Then I guess I'm not smart," Marcus said, and there was something in his voice that made everyone in the room go still. "Because I choose to be on the side of the people you hurt. All of them. Including myself." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and Jonathan's face cycled through expressions of disbelief, fury, and something that might have been grief. "You're my son," he said finally. "My blood. Everything I did for you. For our family. For our legacy." "No," Marcus said quietly. "Everything you did for yourself. I'm not your legacy, father. I'm your victim. Just like everyone else." For a moment, the only sound was the distant wail of sirens as emergency vehicles responded to reports of fires, explosions, and security breaches across the city. Then Catherine's phone began buzzing with incoming calls from journalists who'd received the uploaded files. "It's over, Jonathan," she said softly. "The story's already going live. Every news outlet in the country has the evidence now. You can't buy your way out of this one." Jonathan stared at his wife and son as if seeing them for the first time, his perfectly constructed world crumbling around him like a house built on sand. Then his expression changed, becoming something cold and calculating and infinitely dangerous. "You're right," he said. "I can't buy my way out. But I can take you with me." He pulled out his phone and dialed a number with steady fingers. "Stevens?" "Yes, it's me. Execute Protocol 9. Full biological containment. Authorization code, Prometheus 7. Catherine's face went white. "Jonathan, no. Not Protocol 9. You can't." "What's Protocol 9? Zara demanded. "Industrial accident at the Riverside Water Treatment Facility," Catherine whispered. "Massive chemical spill that would contaminate the entire district. Everyone who ever had contact with the original evidence, everyone who lived in the affected area, everyone who might potentially testify, would be exposed to toxins that cause rapid-onset cancer," Jonathan finished with clinical detachment. "Tragic environmental disaster. Completely deniable. And conveniently permanent." Marcus stared at his father in horror. "You're talking about murdering thousands of people. An entire neighborhood." "I'm talking about protecting our family from the consequences of your betrayal," Jonathan replied. "The facility will have a malfunction in exactly 30 minutes. Just enough time for us to reach a safe distance and establish alibis. But not enough time to evacuate the area or prevent the contamination." "The hospital," Zara breathed. "Grandmother Rose is in the hospital. Right in the middle of the contamination zone." "Yes," Jonathan said with a smile that belonged in nightmares. "Along with everyone else you've ever cared about. Your choice, children. Come with me now, keep quiet about what you think you know, and we can all start fresh somewhere else. Or watch me destroy an entire community to protect this family's secrets." The ultimatum hung in the air like poison gas, and in the silence that followed, three people who'd thought they understood the depths of human evil realized they'd only scratched the surface. Jonathan Whitmore wasn't just a corporate criminal or environmental terrorist. He was something far worse, a man with nothing left to lose and the resources to take half a city down with him. The clock on his phone showed 4:23 a.m. 27 minutes until Protocol 9 went live. 27 minutes to save thousands of innocent lives. 27 minutes to stop a monster who happened to be a father, a husband, and one of the most powerful men in America. The final battle for the soul of the Whitmore family was about to begin. If you are enjoying this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Chapter 8. 27 minutes to save a city. The numbers on Jonathan Whitmore's phone glowed like a countdown to apocalypse as Marcus stared at his father across the wreckage of what had once been a family. In the distance, sirens wailed through the pre-dawn darkness, emergency responders racing toward a mansion fire that was only the beginning of Jonathan's desperate endgame. "You're bluffing," Catherine said, but her voice shook with uncertainty. "Even you wouldn't murder thousands of innocent people just to." "Wouldn't I?" Jonathan's smile was colder than winter rain. "I've spent 30 years building this empire. I've sacrificed everything, my conscience, my soul, my relationship with my own son, to protect what we've built. Do you really think I'll hesitate now?" Marcus looked at his father and saw a stranger wearing a familiar face. This wasn't the man who'd read him bedtime stories, who'd patiently explained complex business concepts during their rare conversations, who'd hired the best doctors and therapists to help him adapt to life with one leg. This was something hollow and desperate, a monster in an expensive suit who'd confused power with love for so long he couldn't tell the difference anymore. "There has to be another way," Marcus said quietly. "There is." Jonathan's voice softened, becoming almost gentle. "Come with me, son. Both of you. We can disappear, new identities, new lives, somewhere far from all this ugliness. You'll have everything you could ever want. Private tutors, the finest schools, unlimited resources to pursue whatever dreams you can imagine." For a moment, the offer hung in the air like a siren song. Marcus thought about what his father was describing, a life without the weight of these terrible secrets, without the burden of knowing how many people had suffered for his family's wealth. He could see the appeal, could understand how seductive it would be to just walk away. Then he looked at Zara, whose grandmother was dying in a hospital bed in the contamination zone, and knew there was only one choice he could live with. "No," he said simply. Jonathan's face hardened. "Then you've chosen to watch thousands of people die for the sake of your moral superiority." "No," Zara said, stepping forward with something that looked like a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "We've chosen to stop you." She held up her phone, and Marcus realized she'd been recording everything. Jonathan's confession, his threats, his detailed description of Protocol 9, all of it captured in digital clarity that no amount of money could erase or discredit. "Live stream," she said simply. "Every word you just said is being broadcast to every major news outlet simultaneously. Your Protocol 9 doesn't exist in secret anymore." Jonathan lunged for her phone, but Marcus was faster, spinning his wheelchair between them with practiced precision. "FBI Cybercrime Division, Emergency Hotline," he said, showing his own phone. "I've been giving them real-time updates on your location and plans. They're already mobilizing teams to secure the water treatment facility." The sound of helicopters suddenly filled the air outside the office windows, not the news choppers that had been circling the burning mansion, but military aircraft moving with lethal purpose toward the industrial district. "You see, Father," Marcus continued, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what was happening, "you taught me something very valuable over the years. You taught me that information is power. And right now, we have all the information." Jonathan stared at his son and the girl who'd brought his empire crashing down, and for the first time in his life, he looked truly powerless. The man who'd commanded boardrooms and bent politicians to his will was just a criminal facing justice, with nowhere left to run and no one left to buy. "Stevens, abort Protocol 9, he said into his phone, his voice hollow. "Abort everything." But the line was dead. Had been dead, Marcus realized, since the FBI had started jamming communications to prevent exactly this kind of last-minute coordination between co-conspirators. The office doors burst open again, but this time it wasn't private security forces. Federal agents in tactical gear flooded the room, weapons drawn, moving with the disciplined precision of people who'd been planning this operation for hours. Jonathan Whitmore, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit terrorism, multiple counts of murder, environmental crimes, and about 24 other federal charges that we'll discuss in detail once you're in custody, the lead agent said, holstering his weapon as other agents moved to secure the area. As handcuffs clicked around Jonathan's wrists, he looked at Marcus one last time. You have no idea what you've done, he said. What you've destroyed. This family, this legacy. This family, Marcus interrupted, starts over now. Without you. 1 year later. The Riverside Community Center buzzed with the controlled chaos of children at play, their laughter echoing off walls painted in bright, hopeful colors that would have been impossible to imagine when this land was contaminated wasteland. Zara Johnson Whitmore, she'd chosen to hyphenate her name as a bridge between her old life and new possibilities, sat at a table helping younger kids with their homework, her patience infinite as she explained basic math concepts in ways that made sense to 8-year-old minds. Miss Zara, called Tommy Chin, the boy from the neighborhood she'd once watched through the Whitmore estate gates, I don't understand this problem about the fish. Let me see. Zara studied the worksheet with serious concentration. Oh, this is about marine biology. Did you know that some fish can create their own light? Across the room, Marcus was leading a science experiment that involved building miniature water filtration systems, a hands-on lesson about environmental protection that had become one of the center's most popular programs. His wheelchair was decorated with stickers that the kids had given him, transforming what had once been a symbol of limitation into something joyful and uniquely his. The key, he was explaining to a group of fascinated 10-year-olds, is understanding that clean water isn't just something that happens automatically. It takes work and care, and people who are willing to make sure everyone, not just rich people, has access to what they need to stay healthy. Maria Santos, whose family had received a substantial settlement from the Whitmore Industries bankruptcy proceedings, raised her hand. My mom says your dad was the one who made our water dirty. But you're helping us clean it up. How come? Marcus considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. At 9 years old, he'd learned to navigate complex moral territory that would challenge most adults. Because what my father did was wrong, he said simply. And when people do wrong things, other people have to step up and try to make them right. That's what families do for each other, and we're all family here in Riverside. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the community center, the late afternoon sun painted everything in gold and amber light. Where there had once been contaminated soil, there were now gardens tended by residents who'd learned sustainable agriculture techniques through the center's environmental programs. Where there had once been abandoned lots, there were now playgrounds where children could run and laugh without fear of poisoned ground beneath their feet. Catherine Whitmore entered the main room carrying a tray of snacks, her face bearing the quiet contentment of someone who'd finally found meaningful work. She'd testified at her husband's trial with calm precision, her 8 years of secret evidence gathering providing prosecutors with an airtight case that resulted in multiple life sentences. Now she devoted herself to the Riverside Restoration Project, using what remained of the family fortune to fund medical care, environmental cleanup, and educational opportunities for everyone affected by Jonathan's crimes. How was school today? She asked Zara, who'd started attending Boston Latin Academy on a full scholarship that covered not just tuition but also books, supplies, and a laptop that she used to help other Riverside kids with their studies. Molecular biology, Zara said with the kind of enthusiasm that made her teachers remember why they become educators in the first place. We're studying cellular respiration. Did you know that the same chemical processes that power our muscles are essentially the same ones that power bacterial colonies? It's like everything alive is connected at the most fundamental level. Catherine smiled, remembering the hungry-eyed girl who'd climbed over their estate wall a year ago, desperate for knowledge and friendship. That girl was still there, still brilliant, still curious, still fiercely loyal to the people she loved. But now she had resources to match her potential, and a support system that encouraged her to dream as big as her intellect could reach. Speaking of connections, Marcus said, wheeling over to join them, I got the acceptance letter today. Both women looked at him expectantly. MIT's summer program for gifted students. They want me to spend 8 weeks working with their environmental engineering department on water purification projects. His grin was incandescent. Guess all those hours building filtration systems paid off. Zara threw her arms around him in a fierce hug that nearly knocked him out of his wheelchair. A year ago, physical affection had been foreign territory for Marcus. His father's household hadn't encouraged such displays. Now he returned the embrace naturally, comfortable with both his own vulnerability and the strength that came from accepting help from people who cared about him. "We'll video call every day," Zara said. "And I'll send you updates on the marine biology research I'm doing with Dr. Martinez at the aquarium." "Deal. But you have to promise to keep helping the little kids with their homework." "Mrs. Patterson says Tommy's math scores have improved 3 grade levels since you started working with him." "Of course. That's what we do, we help each other." As the afternoon wound down and families began arriving to collect their children, Marcus and Zara found themselves alone for a few minutes in the center's library, a room lined with books donated by people from across the country who'd been inspired by their story. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met?" Zara asked, settling into one of the comfortable reading chairs that had replaced the harsh plastic furniture of their childhood. Marcus considered the question seriously. "I think I'd still be sitting alone on that terrace, watching the world through the gates and never understanding that I could be part of it. And I'd probably still be angry all the time, thinking that all rich people were automatically evil and that nothing would ever change." "But things do change," Marcus said. "People can choose to be better than their circumstances, better than their families, better than what the world expects them to be." Outside the windows, the sun was setting over a neighborhood that had been reborn through the combined efforts of government cleanup crews, environmental activists, community organizers, and 2 children who'd refused to let injustice have the final word. Gardens bloomed where there had once been contamination. Families thrived where there had once been illness and despair. Rose Johnson had recovered from her heart attack. The doctors called it miraculous, but Zara knew it had more to do with having reasons to live and fight. She'd been the star witness at Jonathan's trial, her testimony providing crucial context for the decades of cover-ups and corporate malfeasance. Now she worked part-time at the community center, teaching cooking classes and sharing stories with anyone who'd listen about the importance of never giving up hope. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Zara asked Marcus, echoing the question she'd posed in his secret sanctuary all those months ago. Marcus looked around the library, at the children's artwork decorating the walls, at the photographs showing the neighborhood's transformation, at the future stretching out before them like an unwritten book. "Happy," he said simply. "I want to be happy, and useful, and surrounded by people who care about making the world better. Everything else is just details." Zara smiled, thinking about the marine biology program she'd start at Woods Hole next summer, about the scholarship applications she'd help other Riverside kids fill out, about the 1,000 small ways that friendship and determination could change the world. "I think we're going to be okay," she said. "More than okay," Marcus replied. "I think we're going to be extraordinary." Outside, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky, and 2 children who'd found light in the deepest darkness prepared to step forward into whatever adventures tomorrow might bring. They'd learned that justice was possible, that redemption could be earned, and that sometimes the most unlikely friendships could grow strong enough to move mountains. The boy who'd once been trapped behind golden gates and the girl who'd climbed walls to find him had discovered something more valuable than wealth or privilege or power. They discovered that when you choose love over fear, truth over comfort, and justice over safety, anything becomes possible. Even hope. Especially hope. I know you enjoyed this video. Do well to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel for more videos like this. If you have thoughts on this video, do well to drop them in the comments section below and feel free to ask questions. Also share this video to family and friends. The end.